All right. So, Blaine, thank you so much for joining today. I want you to talk to me first about, just real quick, I'm sure you get asked this all the time, lawyer and LPC. So, does that give you a pretty unique perspective on ethics and rules and stuff, or do you struggle like the rest of us?
No, I think so. I mean, I have both brains, I guess, the lawyer and the counselor brain. But, the reason I guess I started to kind of veer into the area of ethics is because I just didn't really feel like there was a lot of ground covered I had a full course in graduate school on ethics, but I really didn't feel like I knew a lot. And then I had counselors asking me, because I was an attorney, like, what do I do when I have a subpoena? Which on the lawyer side is like something I would do every day, right? But therapists just, aren't equipped generally because we don't learn about it, how to deal with it. So yeah, I think it positions me like pretty well between the two worlds and able to kind of navigate both pretty well.
Cool. And I know that you do offer a course. You had recently you had a course about that, about, oh my gosh, I got a subpoena, now what?
Yeah, I have a bunch of courses. So I have that one. I do a 2-hour ethics course for LPCs. I've done some on the difference between W-2 employees versus 1099 contractors. And so if your members have anything, and I always tell people, if there's a subject that you need covered, I'm willing to do a course on it. Just kind of drop me a line and let me know.
Very cool. And just I want to highlight one more course you just did, which is for the newly self-employed LPC associates, right? Because you were pretty involved in getting all that.
Yeah, because when I started my practice as an intern/associate, I was really doing everything by myself, even though I was technically working for a practice. And so over the course of 2 years, kind of learned all the things I thought that we needed to know as associates on how to kind of build a business. And so and combining that with what I know about the law and ethics on how to do that from that end, I just thought, hey, we need that kind of help for our associates out there to, learn how to build a practice with the new rule coming in. And it's been very successful. So we're about halfway through. We've learned kind of the basics of setting up a practice and setting up a PLLC, and I walk people through that, and what types of insurance do you need, what are your business expenses, and so on. So it's been really good.
Well, good. And I want to thank you again for joining me today. So I just talked to Texas counselors creating badass businesses about ways to use social media to market your private practice. And I'll be real transparent. I use it to market my side hustle. So my training and all of that. I haven't used social media to market my private practice in a long time. So I kind of sent you the questions that came to my mind before we talked today. What are the top 3 things therapists should do to stay legal and ethical if they choose to incorporate social media to market their private practice? What kind of came to mind for you?
I think the first thing that you really need to do is have something in your intake paperwork, if you're going to market heavily on social media, that sort of sets out your policies. And you really want to, I guess you really need to know, the thing that really popped in my mind is that you still have to follow your ethics codes. And so, you want to make sure, one of the things is that you're not committing like false advertising. You're making sure that everything that you do on social media is really in line with your practice, and not making exaggerated claims or claims about experience that you don't have. Those sorts of things will obviously get you in trouble. And I think, just having a very clear policy of how you handle your social media presence as distinct from your practice. And what I mean by that is, I think when we market on social media, we kind of have a persona, and maybe that's what we're advertising a little bit as well. But you really want to keep that clear and distinct, from your practice, I guess.
So the persona, and I heard this talked about in another group. Somebody was like, well, what's a persona? What do you mean by persona? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think, because we're marketing, we're obviously trying to sell our services and maybe creating an image of who we are. And I think lots of times, I think we're all on Facebook or some social media where we see, it always looks like the grass is greener on the other side. People post essentially a curated image of themselves. And so you don't want to mislead potential clients through your social media marketing that you're one way on social media, but when you get into the therapy room, you're totally different. And so that's really what I mean by personas. I think we kind of sell ourselves through marketing in a way that may not comport with how we practice therapy. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on that end.
So to be real, be genuine, be yourself.
I think so, yeah. But also just to make sure that those two are in line with each other, or if they're not, that you're kind of making that clear, I guess. Like, hey, I'm on social media this way, but in practice, I do it a little bit differently, just so people aren't confused about who you are.
Now, some things that I get asked about are paperwork. So what essentially what are essential things that you feel like have to go into the paperwork?
I mean, I think, with respect to social media, honestly, I take a little bit different tack than most people because I really want my clients in particular to read my paperwork. And so I've seen practitioners who have, 30-page informed consent documents that nobody ever reads. And so I do think that if you have a social media policy, I would, put that in your informed consent and maybe talk about it in your first session if you're really going to have a huge social media presence. See, I don't, and my clients in particular, I see a lot of teens, and I just don't see teen boys, interacting with me on social media. So I don't really have a specific policy, but things have popped up, and I'll just say, for instance, I have a client who's an attorney, and we're in the same Texas Lawyers Facebook group, and she's been very vocal about having me as a therapist, but I've had to have those discussions with her about, I can't engage with you on social media. You're my client, those boundaries need to be very clear. You can do whatever you want. But situationally, I think in your informed consent, you really need to think about those kinds of situations that are going to pop up and how you're going to handle them and how you want to handle them before you actually get in the middle of the situation. So, I think it's a pretty good idea not to accept friend requests from clients to make sure that boundaries are clear. But just have everything articulated in that policy as to how you're going to act. One thing I also want to, I guess, emphasize is that, lots of times if you're advertising on social media, clients will be reaching out to you through, let's say, like on Facebook, if they instant message you or whatever. A lot of that is not HIPAA compliant. So I don't know that you want to be encouraging potential clients or clients to talk to you through social media platforms. So set up some alternative system where you can direct them to your HIPAA compliant email or phone number or something like that. So probably beyond the scope of what we're going to do to kind of list everything out, but those are the kind of top things that come to mind, is making sure that you maintain clear boundaries, that you adhere to HIPAA. And I think most importantly, I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but the big one is, confidentiality. Mm-hmm. Which is, I think, the biggest problem with social media.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we're going to use social media, that kind of throws confidentiality out of the window, right? So it's almost like having to come from a different perspective. Like you said, if a client wants to out themselves, there's nothing you can do about it because they own their PHI, right? Mm-hmm. But how do you respond to that? Or it sounds to me like you just have an honest conversation in the session with them and you say, look, I see you. I'm just not going to interact with you.
Right. I can't engage with you. And that can become problematic, if you're interacting with others on your social media, but, you're not interacting with your clients, how are they going to take that, those sorts of things. It's a tough world.
So one of that comes to my mind, because I get asked questions that are like, now I want to start using that TikTok thing, or I don't get on Instagram, but I really want an Instagram presence. That's like me saying to me, like, I'm going to go scuba diving, but I've never taken any lessons. You know what I mean? It's like, you have to kind of be familiar with this stuff if you're going to try to use it as a platform.
Well, not only that, but I think there's just sort of in our society, there's this, we see the huge influencers who have big followings, but it's work. I mean, it really is work to build a social media following. So just because you get on Instagram, that doesn't mean you're going to get 10,000 followers. So, you really have to do the work in creating all of the content consistently, to create that sort of base. And then, really you have to figure out, are you attracting, the clients that you want to see? And are they reaching out through that platform? I've listened to some podcasts on some people who've, generated like large therapists who've generated large TikTok followings who, get the occasional client. I think it's more just about getting your name out there. And I don't know, for me, the more traditional marketing techniques seem to be a little more effective than just general social media presence.
I think that's a good next topic, which is, what are some mistakes that you see? And it sounds like a mistake would be sort of like, okay, I'm going to use this, I'm going to really work hard at it, but it doesn't bring me anything in as far as a client.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that categorically, but I think if you're going to be doing social media marketing, that you really need to be, like you said, savvy in what you're doing. And in particular, your metrics, like, how much time are you putting into it? How much money are you spending versus how many clients are you receiving? And then one thing that I think some people talk about, which is a really important number to know, is like, what is your lifetime value of a client? And so, let's just say it's an average of $1,000 per client, then you can have a good baseline as to what you want to spend through social media in time and money to determine if that makes sense for you. But it's difficult. The biggest mistake, honestly, the biggest mistake that I see that therapists do on social media, and I don't know that it's directly pertain to marketing so much as, asking other clinicians, how would you, handle this situation with a client, and then divulging client information. I see it all the time. And I know there are some places where moderators will kind of step in and kind of pare those things down. But I just think social media is not the place where you want to do case consults, like categorically. Call somebody on the phone or get a small group together. Just don't put that on the internet.
That reminds me of an admin, and I have her as one of my admins because I love what she did. She said, if your post starts with, I have a client, then it's going to be banned.
Right. But, that sort of information, even if you kind of make it nondescript, I mean, the last thing you want is your client finding out that you're talking about them on Facebook or in some sort of semi-public forum. And you want to be clear.
So,
I think you also want to be clear in your paperwork if you're doing consults, that, that's articulated as well.
Like I will be talking about you on social media, so prepare.
Yeah, or more so like, yeah, but I don't know that I would say that, but something, like I do consult with other professionals. I try to make it as anonymous as possible, something to that effect, just so your client knows what you're doing.
So what other mistakes come to mind when you think about therapists and social media?
I think, like I said, the time spent on it, I don't know that you really have to evaluate for yourself whether it's worth, the risk and the reward kind of thing. The other thing is, like, we talked a little bit about this, but, you always have to be mindful that anything that you say on the internet is basically forever, even if you tried to delete it. So everything really has to be above board. And there's sort of I guess 3 categories of things that I see that are, in the ethics realm, which is, making false representations, sort of breaching confidentiality. And another big one is keeping appropriate boundaries with your clients, and how do you interact with them and how do you not? Because that's really hard when you have a public presence, to keep your practice separate, essentially.
So this is wonderful, and I'm going to record it. It's going to be in the Step It Up group for our members. I want you to, if you would, talk to our graduate students or our LPC associates who will be self-employed, like they got the okay from their supervisor, and maybe they want to use social media marketing, but their supervisor's not really into it, or their supervisor's willing to learn, but they're not real savvy. Talk to those graduate students or the LPC associates already about what to do with social media.
So I think one thing that I want to say to associates or graduate students is, and sometimes we fall into this trap of not being consumers, in that if you have a supervisor who is not meeting your needs, whether it be through social media or through the actual supervision itself, or allowing you to practice, then you just kind of need to go out and find somebody who will, be more appropriate for your situation. And with respect to social media, in terms of, like you said, the situation where maybe your supervisor isn't as savvy. I mean, I don't see why that can't just be incorporated into, the supervision system itself. I think that's one thing that supervisors in particular are going to have to grapple with, is what does supervision look like now that associates can own a practice? How much supervision time can be spent on things like business development and how they run their own practices. And I think social media is one of those things that, is a really good topic, because obviously I don't think it's going away. But I do think, I guess I should have mentioned this earlier, is that some of the more traditional ways of doing social media advertising have really been curtailed, in particular when Apple came out, I don't know what it was, in the spring, with these privacy restrictions. It made, like, your traditional Facebook ads or Instagram ads, it essentially changed the algorithm so that you're not getting in front of as many people, and it make social media advertising much less effective. I don't know if you experienced that on your end, but that's just the way that it is.
I stopped using the advertising.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and we do have supervisors who will be watching this, because folks in the Kate Walker Training 40-hour training get access. Folks who have graduated from the Kate Walker Training 40-hour training get access to this. So these are brand new supervisors. What, and again, I know we're right here at the end. What, if you have 1 minute, what would you tell these new supervisors who are willing to supervise LPC associates who are self-employed?
I think the thing is just to be sort of open-minded about what you want to do with your associates, and make it sort of organic, and not, just kind of follow their lead and vice versa, and just figure it out as you go along. I do think there are obviously different and new liability concerns that you have to consider, but I would, make it a regular part of your practice to be checking in with your associate on, what are they doing, and making sure, as you would with a client, that they're being ethical in how they approach their advertising.
I love that. Thank you, Blaine. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day.
Welcome. Anytime.
Well, hey, don't say that, because
I'm always available. If you need some more topics, I'm happy to help.
All right. Well, thank you. And everybody, this will be posted as a recording. So take a look at it later, and you can really drill down into what Blaine's saying. Blaine, thank you again so much. Have a great day, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Bye.